Welcome back to the Vanessa G Fitcast. I'm Vanessa Pozos, and here with me is Omar Pozos, my co-host and husband. How are you doing today, Omar?
I am. How am I today? I'm a little scatterbrained. It's recording on a Wednesday today, but yeah, I feel like we just have a lot of things going on, and between work and personal life, I feel like I'm all over the place. How are you doing?
Yeah, I feel, I guess, similarly.
Similarly.
I think I told you earlier before we hit record, I'm like, I am honestly feeling like a good bit of PMS today.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you've been listening to episodes kind of chronologically recently, you might have heard me talk about that almost a month ago now, I had COVID, and I think that like fighting off that infection on top of just that month being a little bit of a higher stress month. You know, we were doing a lot of interviewing, a lot of hiring. We brought on 2 new coaches and been working on getting them up to speed. And
a lot going on.
We had like one of our bigger months in business this year, and like it was just a lot is happening. All good things, all great, wonderful things that we're very appreciative of. But it's just been very go. And so on top of that, with my body kind of going through that, a virus that it's fighting off, I think it messed with my cycle a little bit, messed with my hormones. And I'm telling you, my cycle is feeling off this month. And PMS kind of jumped back on to my radar, which I haven't dealt with, like cramps and a lot of these types of things in a while. So I'm feeling that today, and I'm like, oh man, body, we just got to hang in here.
Oh man, body.
But that all being said too, like it partly inspired a little bit of this episode. So last week we actually traveled to Missouri for one
Good
of
old Branson, Missouri.
Yeah, we went to Branson, Missouri for one of our coaches. She got married last weekend, and so we went there to kind of support her and get to have a great time celebrating her and her love. And so in kind of anticipation of that wedding, like last week, like I was saying, I feel like my PMS has been a little bit stronger than it has been in many months. And so for me, what that might look like in my luteal phase can be, like I mentioned, right now I'm dealing with a little bit more cramps, but last week I felt it coming on where I was like, man, I'm a lot more bloated than I normally am in my luteal phase. I feel like I'm holding a lot more water. I feel more puffy. And just, of course, it's like kind of frustrating when you think about the timing of things of like, here, I would like to look nice for this wedding we're going to. I want to be able to take pictures. I want to feel confident. I know a lot of girls can resonate with that feeling where it's like, if you're going to an event or you're going to be taking photos for something, you're like, yeah, I want to feel confident. I want to feel good. And so it's never fun.
Hot is what I tell myself.
Yeah, but it's never fun if kind of Mother Nature jumps in the way and you're like, man, I'm holding on to a lot of water and water retention, and I look puffy, I look inflamed, and inflammation could be coming for a myriad of reasons. But what I want to talk about today is if you kind of resonate with what I was experiencing there and you want to hear a little bit of like, what are my kind of thought process? How do I approach and navigate when I feel like I'm holding on to more inflammation and puffiness, and I just want to kind of lose a little bit of that layer of water weight for kind of like a specific date, like a event that I'm going to. This is some of the things that I will bring into my routines to kind of help support my body with that. To be clear, none of these things are going to actually address the root cause of your inflammation and puffiness. Like for my example, I am noticing more puffiness and overall inflammation because of my cycle being thrown off, because of higher stress, and because of my body kind of fighting that. So that's where I'm also, of course, working on getting my hormones back in balance. So this is not by any means any kind of like permanent strategies or anything sustainable here. This is truly just like, if you are already working on those things, you're already doing those things, and you're like, man, I just have that little bit of a layer of water weight on me that I want to tighten up a little bit. Here are some things that you can do, let's say over the course of a week, to tighten up a little bit.
Yeah, so it's not the end all be all, but it will point you in the right direction.
Exactly. So starting from the top of my list here, number 1, this one I think is, might surprise some people. It might not surprise other people because we talk about this generally, just in general, of like, this is something we all kind of want to be doing. And that is to drink a gallon of water with added electrolytes. So that kind of with added electrolytes part is important, but let's talk about the water piece here for a second. So ironically, if you are looking more like watery, you look like you kind of have that like layer of water under your skin. A lot of times you might think, oh, well, I should drink less water to tighten up. But the reality is actually you want to do the opposite. You want to drink more water. The reason that you might look like you're holding on to water, you might have a lot of water retention, is typically due to dehydration. So if you are drinking sufficient water and we're adding electrolytes as well, your body should be essentially taking that water and like putting it into the cell where it's actually usable. However, if we're not getting enough water overall, then what your body does is it takes that intracellular water, the water that's in the cell, and it releases it and becomes extracellular water. So that's where you kind of have the water then just sitting beneath the skin, and you look puffy or you lose muscle tone because it's like overall you kind of just look like you have a layer of water around you.
Yeah, I was smiling at this one because I'll share a quick synopsis of our story, but for those of you that don't know, Vanessa is a bit of a water fiend. Like, she's a water addict. You are a camel. And anyways, when we were coming back from Branson, we had a layover in Dallas. And long story short, I was at the Amex Lounge enjoying myself and just taking way too long. And we ended up being late to our next flight. We almost missed it by like half a second. And on the flight, Vanessa forgot to get her water. And,
I didn't forget to get my water.
We didn't have time to buy water.
Exactly. I was planning to get it, but somebody allowed us to use our sweet time to where we had to run to the gate and there was no time to stop and buy a bottle of water.
Yes. But anyways, when we got to the plane, you could just tell the frustration in her face. She was like, it's a 2-hour flight. I cannot go 2 hours without water. Where's my water? And I was like, all right, we're going to figure this out. But when you said drink a gallon of water, it reminded me of that story. But yes, you do like your water.
I love my water. Yeah. But I wanted to start with this one on the list because I think this is also very low-hanging fruit for a lot of people. You might just literally start here and you might notice a big difference in how you tighten up just by focusing on increasing your water intake. But let's say you're already doing that. Let's say you're like me and you're a camel, you drink a lot of water. Then as we get further down the list, you're going to find there's a lot of things here that you probably aren't doing that you could definitely focus on during this period of time where you want to lose some of that inflammation and puffiness. And I should also specify pretty much everything on this list is something that is beneficial for you to do just a kind of across the board generally. All this stuff is healthy and it's going to benefit you. But number 2, so we talked about drinking, that gallon of water or just overall increasing your water intake and adding electrolytes to help. The electrolytes are important to make sure that you're not just exercising your kidneys and just peeing more and kind of letting it out, and making sure you're actually absorbing and using that water in the cell. Number 2, on top of drinking that water, I would encourage you to add a cup of dandelion and peppermint tea every day. So this is something you could even do twice a day if you'd like. Personally, like last week, I was doing this daily, either morning or night. And the reason that I specifically like that combination of dandelion and peppermint, of course you could drink them separately, but I like to put the 2 tea bags actually together, is because dandelion is essentially like a natural diuretic. It's going to help kind of pull out some of that water that you're holding onto. And the peppermint helps with a little bit of that like bloating that you might be experiencing in your GI tract. So kind of helps a little bit with bringing some bloat in the midsection down, while the dandelion's kind of helping pull the water out overall that you might be holding onto.
Yeah, I must say too, I'm not a big tea person. Actually, I'm not a tea person at all. But when I drank them, like as part of my flush and stuff, it really helped and it made a big difference. And if anything too, like if you're huge on coffee, like it to me, I'm like, I don't necessarily need coffee, but I like to have the taste, so it replaces coffee to where I'm like, oh, if it's going to help with bloating and digestion and pulling, all of the extra inflammation, it's a win-win. So totally. It's not, to me, again, it's not the most, I don't love teas, but this doesn't taste bad at all.
Yeah, it's I find it an enjoyable one to kind of sip on, especially to kind of start or end your day. And, like Omar had mentioned, this is part of why we incorporate a lot of teas within the flush, which we've talked about in other episodes before, because teas can be very functional. So these are 2 examples of some functional types of teas that we might use in specific scenarios within a flush, like with Omar's flush. Now, number 3, I will dry brush daily before the shower. And so dry brushing, I think I've talked about this maybe a little bit on past episodes, but it's something that I really enjoy. It's a form of lymphatic drainage support. So lymphatic drainage meaning that essentially when you have the lymphatic system in your body, the way I like to explain it is like the lymphatic system is like the trash cans within your body. So especially when we are trying to get things kind of released, like if you have, maybe some like toxin buildup, like in the flush, we kind of build up some of those toxins and we kind of let them go. Adding some of that lymphatic drainage support is like actually taking the trash out, making sure we're not just like getting it out of the cell and out of, the fat cells, especially where we tend to store those things, but actually getting it out of the body. So lymphatic drainage support kind of helps push the water within your body that's kind of like moving that stuff through. It pushes it to the lymph nodes, which are kind of like the garbage cans. Like as it gets to the actual lymph nodes, that's how you can actually get it flushed out of the body via, urine, sweat, etc. So for myself especially, and I know this for a lot of women who have struggled with more of that like inflammation and puffiness, you might have a little bit of a propensity for that lymph fluid to get kind of stuck in the body. So it's like your body might do a good job of like actually getting some of that out, but then it just stays stuck and sitting there because it's not making its way to the lymph nodes. And you could Google like an image of all the lymph nodes in your body. That's kind of what we're trying to push everything to those nodes. So dry brushing is just like a really simple and enjoyable way to kind of push everything to the lymph nodes. And then just doing it as like a routine of putting it right before you shower can also help then with like the heat of the shower, kind of just helps overall too.
How long do you do it for?
I don't do it for like a length of time. I do typically like 3 to 6 strokes per, area essentially.
Got it.
Honestly, you can kind of just like feel it. Like it's an enjoyable feeling. It feels good. So
I mean, it's just like literally a dry brush, and you're just brushing different areas of your body, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's number 3. Number 4, this also kind of contributes to overall lymphatic support, but this is specifically within the face, and that is to do. And I honestly, I'm not actually sure if I pronounced this correctly.
I wanted to hear your pronunciation on this.
Well, because I always thought I pronounced it correctly, but then I heard somebody say it differently, and now I second guess myself. But it's gua sha, and so essentially that's a gua sha stone is basically like a little stone that you use. It's a little tool that you'll use on your face for that more acute lymphatic drainage support. So it's like the same concept of how you dry brush your body rather than like taking a big dry brush onto your face where it's more sensitive. You use that little stone to help push with all the lymph nodes around your face. I think it's become very popular on like Instagram and TikTok and stuff these days because if you are doing it consistently, you can absolutely see a difference in your face because of a lot of that puffiness that you're holding on to.
Yeah. Even remember when I had what I thought was a sinus infection and more than likely was probably the vid. That helped a ton. Remember when you did all the massages on my sinuses?
Yep. Yeah. No, it helps a lot, especially when you are sick and you have that sinus pressure too. It just helps push things instead of it getting stuck. Yeah.
Ugh. Sounds awesome.
Number 5 is to sauna and cold plunge. Now I would do this. So like the other things I've talked about so far are things that I would do daily. Sauna and cold plunge, like you could do it daily, but if you are newer to this, I wouldn't recommend doing it daily. That's probably going to feel like a lot. So I would recommend, like personally, I aim to do this 2 to 3 times per week. I would love to aim to do it like 4 times per week, but realistically, keeping up with 2 to 3 is already a challenge enough sometimes. But like looking at last week where I wanted to lose some of that water weight, sauna and cold plunge help my body tighten up quite a bit. Sauna, obviously, like this is something people have talked about in the past. It's been popular for many years of like, we think of people that would use like sauna suits to try and lose quick weight. All you're doing is losing water weight, but that's exactly what we're talking about here is kind of pulling some of that water weight out. So with the sauna, you can kind of pull out a little bit of that water weight, but there's so many health benefits to sauna as well. So it's something that it's extremely beneficial. Cold plunging, kind of similarly, personally, I find that I tighten up a lot from the cold plunge too. Number 6, so kind of along the same lines here, we've talked a little bit about that lymphatic drainage support. If I can, I like to fit in a lymphatic drainage massage when I am holding on to a lot of puffiness and kind of that like inflammation and visually feeling like I could lose a little bit of that puffiness and water retention. This did not work out super well for me last week.
I didn't know if you were going to talk about this, but we need to find Vanessa another lymphatic masseuse because the girl that she's been seeing has just been awful. Of course, I'm never going to like blast somebody and say their name, but she's somebody that like I found on Google, and the first time I did the lymphatic drainage massage, it was she did a great job and I really liked it. And I was like, oh, this is really great. I'm going to continue to book her. Well, then the next time I went to book, literally that same day,
she canceled. I'm like, oh, that happens, totally understand. Rebooked. Then it was like the second time she was like, oh, I accidentally, like I put it in my calendar. Like she didn't show up and she was like, oh, I put it on my calendar the wrong day. I'm sorry. I was like, okay, well, let's do that day. And then she ended up canceling.
How many times has she canceled and rescheduled?
Gosh,
At least half a dozen?
Yeah, probably like 6 times.
Yeah.
But the kicker.
You need to find a new girl.
Yeah, I've given up. Well, the kicker is the last time she never even messaged me. This was last week. Again, I was trying to like tighten up a little bit for the wedding we were going to. And so I had originally scheduled this massage for Tuesday. And then Tuesday comes around and she's like, oh, I think it was literally something like that. She's like, oh, I put you on my schedule for next week by accident. And I was like, okay, well, can you do tomorrow or Thursday? We were leaving Friday morning. She's like, yeah, I can do tomorrow. So scheduled for tomorrow. Then that time around, like it didn't seem like it was her fault. She texted me right beforehand. She was like, I'm across town and it's raining really bad. Like I feel like it's not safe to drive in the roads. And I was like, totally understand. I'm like, okay, let's rebook for tomorrow. Confirmed, like that time was good, everything. And so then it was Thursday night. And at this point, I'm like, man, I really hope I can get this lymphatic massage before we travel. And she doesn't show up. And I text her and I never heard back. So I honestly, like, I'm a little bit, I hope that she's okay because I kind of feel like, oh my gosh, did something happen to her? It seemed unlikely that she would ghost. But maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm like a bad client. Maybe she's like, I don't want to keep doing this girl's massages.
Maybe.
She was trying to like.
So what has been like for you, like on the massage side of things? Like what do you like? Because I know you've had a couple of them now. Like what do you like mostly feel, or you feel like is the biggest benefit when you do them?
I mean, literally, kind of everything we're talking about here of losing that water weight. It really. So it's kind of like the same concept as like dry brushing, but it's going to be just like better because dry brushing, you're just using a brush and you're doing it yourself.
Versus
Lymphatic
this time
massage
it's like the person's hand.
is a trained professional who knows exactly where and how to move things and can find the exact spots that you need to like be worked on a little bit more. So when done well, you can definitely like
when they show
notice
up,
a little bit of a difference.
Yeah.
So that's something I would do like in preparation for something like an event for sure. Number 7. So we've talked about kind of a lot of like lymphatic support, getting a lot of that water out. But some things we can talk about too are especially for women who maybe tend to get a little bit more bloated in their midsection. It can be helpful for that short period of time to lean towards eating foods that are easier to digest. That could mean just in general, like if you're thinking about the foods that you eat, and this is where a lot of women make mistakes because they might say like, oh, I want to lean out for this wedding I'm going to, I'm just going to eat salads all week. And that might not be a great move because salads, of course, they might be a little bit lower calorie, but okay, let's say you're eating lower calorie that week. Now you're finding yourself actually more hungry. Maybe you actually break down and binge eat, then you feel even worse. Or you set yourself up to binge eat after the wedding or at the wedding, which is not going to help you in the long run. You're going to kind of like further just dig yourself into that deeper hole. So the reality is it's not to eat less for that week, but when looking at the types of foods you eat, want to eat things that are easier to digest. So it's easy for your gut to process and it doesn't like have a lot of buildup in your gut that might cause a little bit more bloating. So like I was saying, rather than having something like a salad that's a lot of chewing and like does require a little bit more digestive processes, and there's also a lot of benefits to that. So it's not to say we never want to eat salads for this reason. There's a lot of benefits to these types of foods that are, harder to digest as well. But for this short period of time, I might swap out my salad for something like salmon and white rice. Like that's a pretty easy to digest food. Squash and ground turkey. Like squash is a vegetable that's more water-based. You can even just notice the difference when you're chewing it versus chewing like lettuce and I don't know, different stuff that's on a salad other than lettuce. It might mean drinking smoothies. So rather than having like eating a bunch of fruits, like eating an apple, you might have a smoothie with the fruits already kind of basically pre-digested by the way it's blended in that smoothie. So just like some simple ideas there, but you can even Google like what are foods that are easier to digest. And you're really just looking at like foods that your body can tolerate as well.
Yeah. I think I did the opposite of this. And the night before the wedding, we ended up going to a steakhouse and I ended up getting this massive steak and I felt so full, but I
ate a lot of Brussels sprouts that night, which is also like, I was thinking about that as I was doing it, but I'm like, oh man, these Brussels sprouts are so good.
Yeah. But I like the idea though of like, because I think a lot of times, especially like women and not to generalize or anything like that, but I think a lot of people will try to, not avoid eating or eat much less so that they can look good for that day. And then they go into the other end of the spectrum where they do end up overeating to the point where now their digestion's all over the place because of that whole same scenario. So I do like that. If anything, again, not restricting yourself, still eating the same type of foods, but just eating different things that are easier to digest.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. And so I will say, with everything on this list, like I mentioned, everything here is something that like I would encourage you just to like incorporate into your routines, at least here and there, regardless, because these are all very healthy things to just do or have regularly.
Even
this one, number 7, the eat easy to digest foods, is the one that I would say we don't want to do all the time, because you're going to be like pretty much narrowing your diet down into things that are also maybe not as fibrous, or maybe not giving your body as much nutrients overall. So there are a lot of benefits to those harder to digest foods. So we want to make sure this is just a very temporary, short-term thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, even as the holidays come around, people are going to be traveling for Thanksgiving and Christmas and all that stuff. And, on the big day, they're going to want to, take pictures or do stuff with family. So even picking stuff like that, I think, can be super helpful as you start to navigate for that.
Yeah. And one thing I want to say too is we got to be careful with this one too, because we don't want to now be like very restrictive with the types of foods we're eating to where now you just go crazy when all those foods are presented in front of you. This is why with our clients, we very much promote a very inclusive diet of like no foods are off limits, unless you have a true allergy, or unless we're in like a very specific temporary protocol where we need to minimize or eliminate a certain food for a period of time. We want to incorporate foods across the board all the time so that we don't mentally feel restricted. And then, I've only been eating salmon and white rice and smoothies and ground turkey and squash. And now I'm, presented with like this, like all these really rich foods. And I just go crazy eating all of them. And then you're like back and forth between like restrictive and binging, restrict and binge. And that's not a good cycle to be in. Number 8. So this is something that I think can benefit digestion as well for those who maybe have a little bit more of that propensity for bloating. And this is to have kind of that 12-hour window between when you eat dinner and when you eat breakfast. So ideally, this looks like pushing your dinner earlier so that you have more time between when you eat that food and when you go to bed, which helps with your digestion, helps with your quality of sleep, and just gives your gut a good bit of time to kind of rest and settle. I don't encourage necessarily going beyond kind of 12 hours with that window across the board, because I think a lot of women can be overstressing their bodies by actually fasting too much. This is where an individual difference really comes in. So like with clients specifically, it's very much based on what they've done in the past, kind of where their body's at, their specific hormone health, and all the things when it comes to recommendations around intermittent fasting. But a 12-hour window of essentially intermittent fasting, to where you are 12-hour fasted overnight and 12 hours of eating during the day, that's a healthy amount of time for generally across the board anybody to follow, and it gives your body a little bit more rest overall. And then last one, number 9. So this is just lowering stress as a whole. And that sounds kind of like, cool, lower stress. What do I do there? Well, some specific examples of what I would do to help get your body stressed down is go for some walks outside. Do something that you personally find relaxing. Like for some of my clients, they're like, I love like coloring in a coloring book. Other clients, they're like, man, I just find it super relaxing just to sit outside in the sun. Like just whatever feels relaxing for you. And then if possible, get some extra sleep. If you normally sleep 7 hours, try and get 8 hours. Just getting that little bit of extra sleep will help a lot with the water retention. So that's my list of kind of 9 things that I personally focus on if I want to pull off some inflammation and puffiness in a short amount of time. There are, of course, other things we can do with clients, like a cortisol reset or a flush, these different types of things that really can help with this. But I'm not going to go into those necessarily on this episode. If you are interested in more supports, that you're not just having this like, oh, cool, I pulled off inflammation really fast, but now I'm still stuck in this place where I don't like my body. I still don't know how to actually get long-term sustainable results. That's where coaching comes in. So you can reach out to me on Instagram, and we're always happy to see how we can help. But that is all for this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week.
Bye, everybody.